Okay, so I think even if we get more participants come in, I'm going to start the recording now, so we keep to time. I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming along and wanting to find out a little bit more about our CarbonCare project that's being supported by Lotteries West and by Deep. And I thought it was a really advantageous time to actually introduce you to Denise True, who is actually this is her brainchild. So it's not actually Carbon Neutral Charitable Fund, as in myself, who is the brainchild of this as the CEO. It's actually Denise, who's one of our trustee directors. So I wanted to give her the opportunity just to talk about why CarbonCare and what it's about. I'll then hand over to Jennifer West from Carbon West, who is actually conducting surveys on behalf of Carbon Neutral. And then finally to Johanna, who is actually going to be conducting a stakeholder peer review. And she'll be asking around some of your potential participation as well. And Johanna's from Clear South. So we're very fortunate to have both Johanna and Jen help us with this. So with no further, I'll hand you over to Denise, who will tell you a little bit about CarbonCare and why.
Thanks, Louise. And I'm really looking forward to sort of having it been my brainchild to the way that it's evolving with all of the team that you've pulled together. And I think just to give a bit of background in terms of, because I've been involved in various aspects of components of landscape degradation with Salinity Council a number of years ago, and various NHT schemes and programs for restoring the landscape. And CarbonCare is essentially the outcome of a number of years of observations of opportunities of impacts to landscape and where carbon offsets can actually really provide a fantastic opportunity and solution. We need restoration to many parts of the landscape at a large scale and connected. And the question that we're looking at and the CarbonCare initiative is, how can we use carbon offsetting to do this? So it's not often that we take the opportunity from lessons learned from NRM funding and activities and actually interpret that, understand it, and then apply it for even more outcomes. And with the help of Lottery West, CNCF has this great opportunity to do just that for carbon plantings. So CarbonCare is about understanding and sharing social, economic, environmental and cultural benefits of carbon plantings. And so some of the questions are, what are the motivations to carbon offset plantings? Is it financial, aesthetic? Malcolm French, who used to work for Elders as a rural salesperson, found that farms with good quality vegetation and tree planting, demonstrable care for that farm, those properties sold quicker and for a premium price. So what motivates carbon offset buyers is the other aspect to that question. What are the barriers for people? And especially in the absence of legislation in terms of carbon offset buyers, we often think about carrot and stick, but are there other motivators? Are there other opportunities that we can look at and discover? So and to look at what are the benefits from planting trees. There's no right or wrong motivations, but I think that behind all of this, there's more than just the traditional carrot and stick approach that we've had. So by sharing your knowledge, your understanding of what are your motivations, what do you think are barriers, then through this program, which is basically based on, if you look at Landcare has been incredibly successful across the country. So looking at that model, and that gave birth to bush care, to river care, to coast care, and now we have CarbonCare. And hopefully we can take this broader than just Southwest WA. Maybe we can take it to the rest of Australia and the world. And we can share the understandings with the broader community, with industry, with other players in the carbon planting world to collectively make a difference in terms of restoration of carbon planting. Back to you, Louise.
Thanks, Denise. That's really helpful. So I'm now going to ask Jennifer to speak and just to let us know a little bit about the survey approach and how that's going to work so that you've got a better understanding of the approach that we're taking. Thanks, Jen, over to you.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so I guess CarbonCare is a really exciting project, and I commend you, Denise. It's one of those big picture concept projects which it's so nice to see it coming together. Yes, so I'm Jennifer West and I'm Managing Director of Carbon West, and we've been chosen to deliver the market research component of CarbonCare. So I am going to just briefly explain what that involves. And I'm going to again mention the whole system thinking thing that Denise has put into this project, because we have 3 surveys in the project, and they cover the whole market for carbon offsets, I suppose. So we're looking at the demand side, the existing supply side, and the potential future supply side of carbon credits, carbon offsets. So we're not just looking at, how do we make more carbon offsets, but what are we making for? Who are we making for? What do they want? So it's a great idea. So the 3 surveys, the industry survey, we're calling it. So we're basically going out to Australian companies, mostly privately owned companies in Australia, and asking them about their carbon footprint, their carbon, their idea on how maybe climate change is affecting them, and whether they will be or are already offsetting some of their carbon footprint. So, there's where the demand comes from, and, it's really insightful. The results are already coming back in. We've almost actually finished that survey. And yeah, so far it's really interesting what we've got back. And I think, most of the world is telling us that the demand for carbon offsets will increase, and I think this survey is going to support that view. The second survey is of non-participating farmers. So they're farmers from north of Northampton to east of Esperance, who are not involved in any way in carbon. Well, we don't 100% know that, but mostly they're not involved in carbon projects, but they're running, they're managing a large area of land. So we're asking them, we're trying to find out from them what they know, what they don't know, is any sort of potential barriers to uptake, that sort of thing. And that's the group, I suppose, that we probably will be calling on some of our stakeholder groups to assist to make sure that we get the best geographic spread, and we've got a really good sample group there. We've also got the third survey is participating farmers. So they're landholders who already are participating in some way in a carbon project. So yep, that's obviously they are already aware of this industry and participating, and so we've got lots of lessons to learn from them as well. So for each of those, we've obviously had to develop sample groups. For each of them, the aim has been to ensure diversity. So we want to hear from all sorts, not only that are switched on to this carbon issue, but there's also some who are just as switched off. So we want everyone, so we get a really good understanding of each of those markets. And yeah, as I said, we may need some help with the non-participating farmer group in recruiting participants for the survey. As you know, nobody loves surveys. So it's a little bit of a challenge to make sure that we're going to get enough responses to get a really good sample group. Thankfully, we have managed to collaborate with the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, which is good in many ways. One of the ways is that we will deliver these surveys by telephone, like direct interview, which is it's a much better way of getting a broad insight into what people are really thinking than to just ask them to do it online and click, 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 click. So that's a really valuable addition. But also from the farmers, landholders' point of view, it means that they only have to do one survey, not two, because basically Deep Purple is going to do the same sort of research, and now we're collaborating, and it's a great way to go. In doing and designing these surveys, we have done an exhaustive literature review. So we have looked at a lot of previous work done in this area. So our market research consultant, Chris Robinson, has done hours and hours of reading to look at what has been done, what was found, how do we not rehash that research but learn from that in order to advise us on how to move forward and get more answers that can, get past what we already know and move on to things that can help further. And just reiterating the main objectives of this research, these surveys, particularly with the landholders, we're looking at what are their perceptions, what are things that might serve as drivers for developing this market, what are the barriers, what is holding them back so far, and what's the information that they most need in order to drive this forward. So those four things are what we'll be focusing on. The telephone delivery will be hugely valuable in really exploring that. And I think generally the more support we have from our stakeholders, the broader and the more inclusive this whole thing will be. There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And bringing all these stakeholders into this project means we're here for the long haul. We want to take this far. It's a great opportunity. Let's work together, not try and sort of one do something and another do something else. We can all work together, and this will be there'll be great outcomes. So I think if there's anything else you think I need to cover, Louise, that's basically the market research bit in a nutshell.
Thanks, Jen, that's really great. So I'm now going to hand you over to Johanna, because from the very beginning, it was very clear that this had to be a very collaborative project. So rather than have just one consultant to deliver the whole project, what we tried to do was to gain a number of different individuals to help deliver this project, because I think that spoke to the very collaborative nature. So I now want to introduce you to Johanna from Clear South, who's going to tell you about the stage of the project related to some of the case studies we're doing, and also the final report, but most importantly on why we're having this webinar, how stakeholders can become involved in the project and how they can actually make a contribution. So I'll hand you over to Johanna.
Great. Thanks, Louise and Jen. So as Louise has alluded to, it's my job to pull together the research findings that Jen and her team will be delivering to the project. So essentially that will be pulled together into a final report. And what we envisage would be a more valuable tool for the industry is to have quite detailed and broad stakeholder engagement around the document itself. So we'll be inviting industry and stakeholders to contribute to the draft before it's finalised, but also to actually go more broadly into the ag industry. So livestock businesses, banks, agronomists, real estate, and talk to them about where they're at with carbon in their businesses and how they see carbon farming evolving, what their perceptions are around well, not so much the barriers, but where they see it heading. So that's quite, it's not another survey, but it's an informal discussion essentially with a number of players to just get a feel for that other element of the value chain essentially. So that engagement will be happening as of tomorrow. Actually, Louise and I have got some targeted meetings that we'll be attending. And then we're very, very keen for the likes of yourselves that are present today and the broader stakeholder network around natural resource management and land care, and some others as well, to give us your thoughts from on the ground, given particularly the NRM groups and the catchment groups, the grower groups are usually the first port of call for a farmer when they're looking for new information around natural resource management opportunities. So how can the industry best equip and prepare and support the likes of those sorts of stakeholders. So definitely encourage you to participate in the post webinar survey, and certainly keep in touch with the project team about how you want to be involved if any further. So essentially, the report is going to be a communication tool for all of us, not just CNCF. It's going to provide a voice for farmers and the broader industry on carbon farming as it develops here in Western Australia. And I guess the important thing is that it's developed for Western Australia.
Thanks, Johanna, that's really helpful. And I think Johanna's point about it being a tool and a voice for Western Australia feels really important to me as, you know, as the CEO of CNCF, that actually what we develop, particularly because of the types of projects that we do with native, you know, revegetation and very much around the Western Australian landscape, that whatever we produce is a voice for all of the landholders in this community, and the, you know, this broader community throughout Western Australia. I think is really a really important part. We want to invite you as well to, you know, if you want more input, if particularly you're interested in being a peer reviewer of the report, if you're interested in actually taking part in, we're planning to do, from the stakeholder meetings that we're having, we're planning to potentially produce a case study around that as well, so that we can actually understand that voice particularly. And I think also what we're really understanding, and you all know this already, of course, but you know, you understand as you go in these things, is that actually you are so vital as a touch point to that community in terms of where they access their information from. So we really want your input, because I think if we gain your input, then actually what we'll end up with will be a much more valuable piece of work that everyone can actually use. So we, as I said at the beginning, we're deeply grateful for the support that we're getting from Lotteries West from this. I think it's a long, there have been lots of surveys about barriers. I was very keen right from the outset that we didn't talk about barriers, because yeah, barriers are great, but actually what we need now is some levers. So what levers do we need to push in order for this to actually happen? And for us here as a community to take control of the carbon market here in Western Australia, so that we get the best outcome for all landholders. I think that's a really important piece, and that's something we can only do together. So I'm going to just pop into the chat the actual survey, but if you don't get the opportunity to pick it up here, that's fine. I'm going to be sending it out to all of the invitees, and I really hope that you take the chance to complete it. It would be really helpful to us. But also, if you do want to be in touch with any of us, please just email me, and I will put you in, you know, if it's the farmer surveys or the more broader surveys you're interested in, I'll put you in touch with Jen. If it's the stakeholder piece, I can put you in touch with Johanna. And we would love to come out and actually meet you in person as well, and kind of get to, you know, I'm fairly new to this role, so I'd love to come out and meet you all anyway, just to say hi. But I particularly would love to, yeah, find out what inputs you would like. So thank you for giving up half an hour of your really busy days, because I know you're all really busy people. And yeah, if you do have any questions, please kind of shout out. We do have a few minutes now, so if anyone does have any questions, you know, just straight off the bat, please go ahead. Just pop your hand up, and yeah. Sally.
Yeah, I'm loving listening to what you're talking about there. We've actually just conducted a similar sort of study, but around regenerative agriculture with farmers, and we extended it out. We did two things that you've mentioned, which are really important. Went to a diverse group, so we had those people who are massive supporters and massive detractors and people in between, and went out to a wider stakeholder group, including the likes of banks and farm advisors and so on. So a similar type of exercise on a different, but in some way related topic. I wanted to ask, with this, is the objective purely to be able to share better information with landholders to get them on board with carbon farming? Or are you also looking, where you're talking about the future supply opportunities, at new product development and how you might change the carbon market to be more appealing for farmers?
All and more, I would say.
Good.
So most definitely, I think initially what we want to do is to, I think one of the things that we're already discovering really early on is that actually information is key. It's so complex.
Yep.
I think, you know, for me, sort of coming into this landscape, you know, it's a complex landscape, and landholders and generally farmers, you know, they're in business because they're in business.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we have to provide information, and however that information is disseminated, we have to provide information that's easy to understand, that's clear, that's not full of red tape, that's just digestible in some form or another, and also speaks to the economics. But I also don't want to put that ahead of the survey, because actually what I'm interested in is not what I think, but in what they think.
Yes.
So
Prejudice it. Absolutely.
I don't want to prejudice it or put bias it, because just because I think that doesn't mean to say that that's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, and when it comes to product development, of course, we're always looking at new means of actually encouraging people to participate. So we would certainly be, you know, wanting to develop that part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say more, I do mean more, because this is actually a 5-year project.
Oh,
so
great.
we are hoping that over this project life cycle that we can actually develop the industry in a way alongside our competitors, alongside the other stakeholders, in a way that actually benefits the Western Australian landscape. And as Denise says, you know, when we've modelled that here, maybe that's then something that we can take out further as an idea, whether that's Carbon Neutral Charitable Fund that delivers that, or someone else in the future, who knows, but you know, we can deliver that out again as a really strong model.
That sounds great. I might just throw in a couple of things in case they're useful, and you may well have thought of them already, but these were things that actually came up quite strongly in the study I've just talked about, and I think they are potentially something that could come up in yours, not to bias, but just to have an awareness of things.
And by the way, your study's really good. I had read.
Have you read it? Oh, thanks. Thank you. The profitability side of things, you know, absolutely, these guys are in business. But what we found was it's being able to demonstrate that profitability of a practice that can be demonstrated and replicated at a very local level. And that is one of the most challenging things with the farming environment. And, you know, across Western Australia, you actually have a lot of different mini environments that are going on that you need to deal with. So your farmers want to know how it works in their own environment, and that creates a lot of different scenarios that you need to evidence it in, I suppose. And the second thing, you talked about trying to find out how farmers are approaching NRMs, for example, but we came through very strongly that peer-to-peer information is just so fundamental to these guys. I might be preaching to the converted with the crowd we've got here, and they're really, you know, they're going to their neighbours for information. They're looking to leaders within the industry who are farmers themselves, who have already tried this stuff. And they're big users of Twitter and some of those sort of online mechanisms, understandably, because they're all spread out. They like to use that stuff. So those are just a couple of things that you may find comes up.
We have had a look at your the report. It's fantastic. It's
thank you.
Yeah, it's a great piece of work. So
thank you.
We have definitely drawn from that to make sure we're sort of considering all those things that showed up. Because while regenerative agriculture and carbon are connected, they're also very different. But it's going to be an interesting. It'll sort of be quite interesting to compare the two, perhaps at the end, because they are quite similar.
It will, yeah, it will be interesting. I've actually, I'll stop talking in a second, but I've actually just come off another call, which is the EPA Stakeholder Reference Group, and we were talking about the EPBC interim report, and how one of the recommendations in there is that we tie together more closely the biodiversity market and the carbon market, because ultimately those things, you know, putting trees into the landscape and plants into the landscape, ultimately you have got benefits for both sides.
That is music to my ears, Sally. That's all I can say.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, that was a recommendation in their report, and we were going, yay.
Yeah, I think we're all doing a big yay for that one.
Would it be worth perhaps just expanding on, because we've talked a lot about the surveys in this report, but maybe expanding a little bit on that for the other parts of the Lotteries West project?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said to you, this is a 5-year project that they're supporting. So there are a number of different elements to it. One in particular, I think, is very interesting. Obviously, there's a big movement across the agricultural community in terms of trying to understand what it's going to take to become carbon neutral as an industry. So we're developing, along with Melissa Welsh from AgriFocus, a farm calculator, which we're hoping will, there are a number of different organisations that are currently working on farm calculators at the moment, but what we're hoping is that, you know, again, we can take a more collaborative approach to that farm calculator and actually come up with something which is suitable across particularly Western Australian farming industries, because a lot of the developments has been more East Coast based. So yeah, we're hoping that we can kind of collaborate on that. So that's one of the things that we're actually doing, and it's being supported. We could quite possibly collaborate with you on that as well. I know one of the NRM groups has got some initiatives working on trialling natural capital accounting pilots actually in the field already. So a similar sort of thing. We should talk on that. Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to hear more about that. The other part is almost speaks to this as well. So we're actually looking at what are the co-benefits of biodiverse planting, so beyond carbon, in order to get an economic model around that. And that really speaks into, again, this whole how do we value natural capital and how do we get that onto our balance sheets in a way that actually represents the future value. So as an accountant, that one's quite dear to my own heart because I quite like that kind of thing. So yeah, we're following that very closely. So again, we're hoping to have some reporting out on that towards the sort of late springtime. So again, you know, all of these things that everyone's doing, I think, is all additive to the bigger picture, and where we can, you know, work together on it, I think, you know, we're ultimately going to get a much better result for everybody. So, and then the final thing that we're working on as well is we're being supported on, it's actually working on understanding the benefits of sandalwood planting, which is a little bit of a tricky one at the moment, as you may all be aware. So we're kind of looking at that, but you know, that's, again, it's a bit more longer term. That's a bit further out in the landscape of what we're actually doing. Carbon Neutral Charitable Fund has been very well known in the past for the research that, you know, basis that it takes, you know, whether that's into saltland carbon, salinity issues, whether that's around, you know, different types of agroforestry approaches, biodiverse carbon approaches. And so, you know, we're wanting to always develop that as well, because that's the core of the business that we're actually in as a charitable organisation. So that's another area. And then finally, we're also, I don't know if everybody knows this, but actually Carbon Neutral Charitable Fund was one of the very first carbon calculators out there. And it's kind of, we've done some like backroom updates to it over the years. We're actually getting a brand new one. So that will be quite good fun. I'm quite looking forward to that. That's more for households and individuals, that part of it. And then finally, as an organisation, we're actually having a complete rebrand. So we've got a brand new name and a brand new look that's all coming out, and that will be, well, around about the 1st of October, where we'll be revealing our new name and our new identity. But actually the core of who we are and what we do, it hasn't really changed. We're just giving ourselves a whole new look so that people kind of get refreshed with us. So, yeah, that's, I hope, covers everything on, yeah, what we're sort of up to over the next coming months. I'm excited. It's a great job. I can't believe I got this job. I'm really happy.
It sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
it really is.
Mm.
So I know we do have a few more. We've got time possibly for one more question if anyone's got anything else, because we did start 5 minutes late. So no, well, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone who's here, and also thank you to everyone who watches this later in the comfort of their either their TVs at home later this evening or at the office tomorrow. And yeah, thank you all so much. And yeah, again, I'm just going to repeat the ask. If you could, you know, come in, complete the survey, or be in contact with us, and then, you know, I think we'll get a better result from the whole report, from having everybody's input. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.